Welcome everyone to the Committee on General and Housing. Today is Thursday, March 13th. What we're going to do this morning is the first thing will be a walkthrough of our committee housing bill, the latest draft, which is draft 8.1. And our legislative counsel is here to assist us in that effort. During this first hour, we may receive a visit from the chair and maybe a member of the House Human Services Committee. One of the things that Cameron alerted us to is that there was a duplication of the material in our bill relating to recovery housing and their bill relating to recovery housing. And at first I thought that it was fine that we just were both there. And in fact, in my testimony before appropriations, I alerted to them to duplication. This happens and they just take care of it there. However, Teresa Wood let me know that no, after thinking about it, because she was the one who said, okay, it's okay. No, it really would be better if not, that there are issues and background issues. So I asked Teresa Wood if she would just come briefly, like for 5 minutes, and explain it to the committee. But I think what we're going to end up doing, it's on the last page of the bill, we'll strike that. I will alert, and if we do that, I will alert appropriations that, you know, we stand by our support for recovery housing and hope that its funding is increased, but we just are eliminating it. The only other thing I want to say to the committee, keep in mind as we go through this bill, particularly as when we get to the appropriations sections. Right now, I learned now that appropriations has almost, not quite, $300 million worth of requests above and beyond the governor's budgets. We're at the point where if we add something, we have to take something out. And so, although I think we stand by our requests, I think you should assume, as you think about this bill, that the ultimate result will be a fraction of what we asked for. I mean, it's perfectly possible that the request for VHCB or the request for VHFA will literally be cut in half. In fact, given that what I just said, that they have almost 20 times what they've got, I'm afraid to say, and we're in a different era than when we had a lot of federal money. I'm afraid to say, I think that it's very likely that what we would, more likely than not, that what we will see in the final bill is a fraction of what we requested. It's perfectly possible that VHFA will end up with $10 million instead of 20, and VHCB will end up with, for all I know, $10 million instead of 25. We just don't know. Except I think it's unlikely that we'll see anything like the numbers we put in there. But that's okay. What they wanted from us is priorities, and they wanted from us our general sense of what we really care about. Then they'll work with the rest. So with that, Cameron, would you like us to walk us through draft 8.1, and then we can bring it back to the committee to discuss it.
Absolutely. Good morning. Happy Thursday. For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel, and here to discuss draft 8.1 of your committee bill, which my understanding is available on your website, and you all have a copy. Mr. Chair, would you like me at this point, do you want to go back through section by section, just highlight the amendments since the last time we met? You know, what's your pleasure of the level of detail you want this walkthrough to be?
I think that what we should do this time, since this may be our last walkthrough. Oh, I should explain. There was an issue that arose with the institutions corrections committee they manage they manage the capital budget, and they were concerned about the implications of anything that would finance water and sewer. That issue has been completely resolved. There is no conflict with our bill. So that's done. With the exception of the one thing I just mentioned, the Human Services Committee is satisfied with this draft. The one remaining thing is that yesterday, the Environment Committee had a drive-by, flyover, whatever we call it, on the appeal sections and took testimony for 2 hours, including Judge Zone, VNRC, and the League of Cities and Towns. The testimony I would characterize as sort of complicated and arcane and not particularly completely informative to members of the committee who were unaware of any of this. I was not able to testify or speak because it was lunchtime and they stopped. So my understanding is they're taking it up again today, this morning. I may or may not be asked to appear. I have asked.
In the new language?
Yes, they have, both the speaker and Amy Sheldon, the chair of that committee, have the new language. So that's where what I'm saying is that with that one piece out there, we have now navigated all of the flyovers that we need to. And we can't, if that is resolved this morning, we will be in a position to vote on this bill this afternoon after the floor.
Okay.
Which is why we have the time we do this morning to air. So what I think you should do is concentrate on your, guess what? Come on in. I was just gonna say, you should concentrate on your changes, but maybe quickly summarize like when you go to videos, rather than just say no change, just quickly. Okay, could you
Yes.
vacate for a moment and can we pull up one more chair?
Oh, yep, I got it.
So I'm gonna leave my laptop here, move it.
I got it. Whatever is comfortable for you, you don't, we don't need it, you know, if it's easier for you, that's fine.
Welcome to our committee.
Oh, well, it smells nice and minty in here. Scary.
We have a humidifier. Just to set this up again, as I mentioned, there may have been all along a conflict between an existing bill coming out of this, the Health Human Services Committee and our bill inadvertently, and so this is attempting to address that, and we may end up just striking part of our bill from it. But I asked the chair to come in and tell us about it briefly.
Well,
And she brought along her vice chair.
I brought along my expert in this field and who had this part of our budget deliberation when we looked at our budget memo. And
Would you like to introduce?
I will, just a moment. I am trying to load up the most recent version of your bill, 8.1.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see
It's,
it.
by the way, everyone, since you have hard copies, and you know what, Teresa, would you like a hard copy? I have an extra.
That's all right. I got it here.
Okay.
We don't do hard
It's page
copies.
37 of 37.
Okay. So Representative Teresa Wood, for the record, Chair of House Human Services.
Representative Eric McGuire, Human Services.
So thank you for the opportunity to review with you something that I became aware of yesterday. It's not in yellow anymore. Okay.
It's at the very end,
Thank you.
37.
There we go. Okay. So
Do you want it on this? It's up to you whether you want.
I don't need it on the screen. No, I mean, you all have copies of it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. as you know, jurisdiction for substance use services is in my committee, our committee. And the Vermont Department of Health currently is the entity that oversees all substance use services in the state. And in our process, we assign budget teams to each one of our departments. And Representative McGuire led up the budget team for the health department and reviewed all of the requests from the health department, as well as the opioid settlement abatement fund advisory committee. So a few years ago, as some of you are aware, the legislature set up a special fund to receive the proceeds from lawsuits that are filed on behalf of the state, that the Attorney General files on behalf of the state with a myriad of other states, essentially against the manufacturer of opioids. And in that settlement, there was very prescribed way in which the fund needed to be set up and in how it benefited opioid treatment and recovery. And so this year, last 2 years, appropriations from that fund have been a little bit helter-skelter in the big bill, in the budget bill. And this year, the administration asked for them to be all consolidated into one bill. That's H218 that was voted out of our committee and is now sitting in House Appropriations. And Representative McGuire will be reporting that on the floor. So just to back up a little bit about the process, the Opioid Advisory Settlement Committee reviews all of the proposals from a wide variety of entities, from very small, like, local community fire department to a statewide organization like the Department of Disabilities, Age and Living, or the Department for Children and Families. I'll let Representative McGuire talk about the proposals that they received and all of that kind of stuff. But their purpose, and it has municipalities on it. It has people in the field on it. It has 2 legislators on it, one from the House, one from the Senate. And their purpose is to make recommendations to the legislature and to the Department of Health. And the commissioner serves as a non-voting member on the committee. That this year, we were very fortunate. They both had the same recommendations. And so it's a process, okay? It's a process to get approved by the Opioid Abatement Settlement Fund Advisory Committee. It's a long title. And they consider all of the applications. And in a time where it's sometimes difficult to get people to agree to things, we had the administration agreeing on it. We had an advisory committee agreeing on it. And, that's a good thing from our perspective. It made our work much easier. So when we saw in a bill coming from the Housing Committee, an appropriation coming out of the Opioid Settlement Abatement Fund, it raised a lot of eyebrows for us. And so I approached the chair and he said, come in this morning, tell us what the issue is, and we'll see what we can do. So I will tell you that we're recommending that you remove this from the bill. And I'll let Representative McGuire speak to the process that went through and the consideration. It's not like these things weren't considered, because they were considered.
Yeah. The advisory committee, how they considered, they got 54 proposals. And they chose to fund 20 of the proposals. They took testimony, they had those agencies come on in, and they went through the process that was established by that advisory committee. Now, with that, through their process, they provided us the recommendations back. So their chances are good. They did put in what's being noted on your folks' bill. They did submit a proposal. The advisory committee chose to not take up that proposal. It's not like they denied it or anything. They just made the choice to say, no, we're gonna, proportionally speaking, these are the proposals that they chose to accept. Now with that,
So they were prioritizing essentially, yeah.
they were prioritizing how the process was laid out. Now, I believe it's vitally important, and this is where the concern has been raised, is if the process, we need to allow the process to take place. And if we choose to allow agencies to come on in, or we then begin to allocate money out of that fund that wasn't recommended, I don't believe how that's fair, equitable, and inclusive to the agencies that went through the process. So that's why we're making the recommendation that this is removed from this bill. And that sum it up.
So basically, you just don't want us to use the abatement money if we were to choose to send money.
Theoretically, you can't.
Well, I'm just saying that's, if the abatement money didn't have anything to do with this, would you be here if this was just us saying we want to send money?
Oh,
Wherever it comes from,
yeah, if
I'm asking,
you
would you be
folks were
here?
looking to fund those through, whether it's a global commitment, global fund, however appropriations look to it. Yeah, we wouldn't be here, but with you sourcing the opioid abatement fund. Yeah,
Understood.
And it is, in our budget process, so we had kind of two separate processes when it came to substance use treatment. And the administration also has a proposal in its FY 26 budget for a recovery, they're calling it a campus. I hate that word, but that's what they're calling it. Recovery campus as essentially a step down facility, if you will, a step down program from residential treatment, and it's sort of the next layer down that is a missing link in Vermont. It's a bit different than the recovery residences here. So we did consider what do we need to do in the general fund, as well as what do we need to do in the opioid abatement fund. And, just for some history, these folks did receive a substantial increase last year.
These folks being the recovery
Yes.
residences.
Yes.
Yeah, could you, if you know, I mean, we received testimony about the recovery residence. It's housing, it's a form of housing that's
Yeah.
desperately necessary. And we've heard from VACB and others, as well as the advocates, that we should do what we can. So where do they stand in terms of, does 218 only deal with the opioid settlement, or is there anything that you have advocated to approach as to funding of the recovery residents?
218, yes, only deals with the opioid abatement settlement fund. In our budget recommendations under combination of global commitment and general fund, we have recommended the governor's recovery. I'm trying to come up with a different name at campus, but that's what it's called, the recovery campus. And we did recommend cost of living increases for the not only the recovery homes, but the recovery centers, right, which are two different things. So like the drop-in centers. So we did address not what they wanted, but we did address a need for continuing to support those organizations through recognizing that our community-based providers do need to receive a cost of living increase. We did not expand the number in the budget because we agreed with the administration's proposal, having been involved with the federal judiciary on this topic for a number of months now. And they are really looking for the state to step up with that interim space where more professional staffing in a recovery home is needed. And we chose to prioritize that over the addition of recovery residences.
More staffing.
Recovery residences are more of a peer support model. And the
Right.
campus as proposed is more of a professionally staffed model,
Right,
as that sort of interim step. And it includes employment supports and things like that. And it's, recovery housing is, you know, as you, I mean, you heard testimony, so you know what it is, but, that interim piece is what our system was missing. And so we felt that that was a higher priority than adding additional recovery housing when we have limited funds. So that was our decision-making process.
so do I understand correctly that the governor's recommended budget did allocate some opioid settlement money to the recovery residences in the budget?
No,
No,
they actually took money out of the budget
yeah.
because it was addressed in the opioid
Right.
settlement fund.
So the governor's recommendation was how much for the recovery residences
The governor did not recommend for the recovery residences.
at all?
Right? That's my recollection?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah,
And you in your letter did
yes. A COLA increase.
a COLA increase from their existing,
From their existing base.
right?
Yes.
And you chose, I'm just trying to get it clear.
Yeah,
You chose to focus on staffing,
on a staff model
on a staff model.
as the missing piece of our residential
Right,
support services.
thank you. Go ahead.
And no monies toward the recovery house. That's the middle part to focus on money being allocated to that part of it, the missing piece.
No, we did fund the missing piece,
That's what I mean, but
Yes.
not recovery house.
not recovery housing. We focused on the recovery campus
Okay.
as the missing
So-
piece of what we have.
May I share something?
Yeah.
Just briefly, that
Oh, well, I
kind
don't
of
know.
puts it in.
Ask the chair.
to,
Please.
to put it,
You're both
taking-
gone. You're both.
to put it a little bit more in the context, H218, the recovery residencies are one of the 4 that will remain consistently funded throughout the existence of that fund. They receive $1.4 million is allocated to recovery residencies, specifically from the opioid abatement fund.
And that's the addition, that was the big fund last year.
Is that in total or every year?
Every
Every
year
year.
through the life of the abatement, there are 4 that will consistently remain funded through the life of that fund. And one being the recovery residencies.
And we did that on purpose because we felt that those particular 4 services, they're not one-time services. They're not one-offs like, you know, a training program at the local fire department or something like that. We know that you can't just fund recovery residences 1 year out of the special fund and then not continue funding. So there were 4 services, recovery residences being one, that we said will, as the representative said, will continue to fund as long as the abatement fund is there.
And they do receive also funding in regards to their grants from the department down to them to, there's that other piece too. So don't think that they're not receiving any funding from the state. They still receive their funding, whatever their base grants look like, their base funding looks like with their grant proposals with the state.
Ashley,
I was just gonna say, I think Rep Dodge had a question,
I did, yeah.
then Rep Charlton, then Rep Burrows, and then Rep Petty, so.
That was my question that you just answered, so I appreciate that. I was just making sure that, you know, I've heard a lot of advocates and people in recovery speak very highly of peer support. And so I just wanted to clarify that even if, so you're saying that with the abatement dollars, you're trying to put, you know, echo the priorities that have been said, you know, we need some of the professional support, but you're saying that there is money that we're putting into peer support.
1.4 million each year from the abatement fund. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
And we too value peer support as a integral component of recovery for folks. Yeah.
Great.
other questions?
Yes, so I'm just trying, you probably have already explained this, I'm just trying to clarify. The recovery campus, for lack of another word. Is this a priority over providing additional beds in other residential units around the state?
We felt that it was a priority because it's a missing part of the system. So Vermont has, even though we have a significant substance use problem in the state, Vermont also has one of the most well-developed systems for treatment and recovery in the country. With our hub and spoke system, with the support of recovery residences, recovery centers, residential treatment. But we've consistently received reports that people need what I call more time. It's what they call it, more time. So you may have heard from some of your constituents that said, they discharged me from Valley Vista. I'm just using Valley Vista as a name. And I had 2 weeks there and I needed more time. Okay, well, it's not like there's a time limit at residential treatment. It's just that the insurance won't pay, whether it's private insurance or whether it's Medicaid, won't pay beyond what is medically necessary. And so once you have detoxified your system, they don't consider it medically necessary anymore for you to be at that high level of treatment. And so, but that doesn't mean that you don't need staff support to remain sober. And some folks can do okay and move like to recovery housing directly. Some folks do okay if they go back home. But more often than not, what we have seen from the court systems as they've given us input is people need more time with that very structured support that is staffed. And also time to help them think about what's next, like employment supports and counseling and things like that. And so that's what this missing layer that the health commissioner is calling a campus. It's 15 beds. And that piece we prioritized in developing the system out further because we don't have that right now. And we do have recovery residences, and we actually expanded residences last year. So we felt like, okay, it's okay to keep this. We wanted to keep the recovery residences stable. But we really feel like if we're going to add to the system, we need to add the piece that's missing. So that's what we chose.
I'd like to thank you for that. I think it's really important that the piece after detox, and thank you for explaining that, has been glaringly missing. How many peer support recovery residences are currently in full operation?
It's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head.
I can give you a rough around 75 beds throughout the state. How many specific locations? Say 9 if we add in the beef, tar and B4, right around in that ballpark.
I think there's more than that, though. We can get back to you on the specific number of how many recovery residences are in. There is a difference between certified, Vermont certified, VTAR certified recovery residences and recovery residences that have not yet gotten their certification. So you might be speaking of the certified residences, but I think there's a few more. But we'll get you the number.
Thank you. I would appreciate
Yeah.
that. And also where they're
Where the
distributed.
locations are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Mine exactly had to do with what Leonora and Elizabeth and I had this conversation after testimony, that there was a missing piece between recovery house and treatment, as long as the staffing is there,
Yeah.
professional staffing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Right. And there's a total of $2 million in the budget for that. 500,000 in fit up and capital expenses and 1.5, right?
1.4.
1.4 for the recruitment and establishment of the campus.
Is the 500 in the capital budget?
No, it was in the health department budget. I'm gonna let, the administration figure that one out.
Ed?
Thank you both for coming in. I want to clarify what I'm hearing to make sure I have an understanding. So currently, in our budget, we have a $2,510,000 appropriation to recovery residences, specifically certified recovery residences. 360,000 of 360,000 of that, sorry, is from the general fund. Are you recommending that we take all of the appropriation out or just the appropriation that we had coming from the opioid abatement fund?
Well, I wanted to ask you what the 360,000 was for, because it doesn't really say in the bill. It just says it goes to them, but what's it for?
Yeah, it's a budget request. It's their budget request from the general fund. The fiscal 25 was 30,000. And I'd have to look at the email. It was 30,000 and they're asking 360,000 for general fund. I'll have to answer that question in a minute. Let me look quickly.
So if it's for what I would say general operations, then that is, I leave your committee's jurisdiction up to you, but that would not be in your jurisdiction. That would be in our committee's jurisdiction. If it's, and then the 1.5 for establishment, it says including at least 3 new. So I know the recovery residences don't cost $500,000 a piece. And so I don't really know if this is for continued operation as well as 3 new residences. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah.
And it would be helpful to know if this is just for the development of new recovery residences, it would not be 1.5 million.
What the email.
Say that's accurate.
The email to me said the 300,000, no. The 360, is it 360?
360.
360. The 360 is intended to be a general fund base increase to Vermont's existing certified residents. They're proposing that this be accommodated in section B 313 of the department's health budget, where their current general fund based funding lives. But the legislature could choose to add this on to the appropriation in H218, et cetera. That's what it says.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is you didn't include that in your letter. It's not in in your budget recommendation. And besides, you believe that despite our general interest in the subject, it's not really in our jurisdiction, it's in your jurisdiction.
Yes. And I don't want to give the impression that all of these things weren't considered, because they were considered. And, just like we all in this building are having to prioritize, we had to prioritize. And so, yeah, that sounds like general operations to me, Chair Mahali. And what did they give you for details on the 1.5? So if we were to take out opioid abatement fund, what did they give you for details on the 1.5?
The opioid abatement funds, I don't know why they say plus 300,000, but the opioid special funds were intended to cover the startup costs of 3 new residences, which the BTARR as identified will be operation in fiscal 26. We are asking for this to be accommodated in 218 for a total appropriation of 1.5. It was 300,000, I guess. They want 1.5 total. In other words, I guess what you're saying is existing is 1.2.
Which is already covered in
Which
the
is covered.
opioid abatement special funds.
Yeah, and they want 300,000 more for they want 300,000 more
Or three additional.
for the three additional new startup costs to cover. I think it's operational. It says startup costs of the three new residences.
So that would be something that would seem to be jurisdictionally something appropriate for either of our committees, and that would be, certainly we would not say, that that's not a need, because it is a need. I wanted us to understand clearly what was being done, and it feels like a little bit of
Yeah, I get it. But just to clarify, if we were to say, so we said B1 says 360,000 from the general fund for recovery residences. That's operational, and they're saying, really, that's in your jurisdiction. If the 1.825 it seems to me that this is doesn't quite match what you're saying. Really what it is 1.2 million existing, and then an additional 300,000 to cover startup costs.
of the new
Yeah,
residences.
that you have less trouble with.
Startup costs of three new residences. I would have to, perhaps have you double check with VITAR about whether that's three in addition to the three that they started in 25. If it's not three in addition to the three they started in 25, then I would say that has already been funded. Is that right? I mean,
That would be-
yeah.
Okay,
And then the 325 to cover first month's fees, again, that would be something that would be in our jurisdiction. It was funded as a sort of pilot out of the budget last year. We did not continue it this year. It is something that they can do, but we did not supply additional funds for that this year.
great.
And I believe they did submit a proposal to the opioid settlement advisory committee. And the committee chose not to take up that proposal.
Right.
So all in all, what this sort of kind of boils down to is that if there is 300,000 being requested for three new residences in 26, we would be supportive of that, of course. If it is not for three new residences and it's the three residences that were already started in 25, they have received startup funds for those already. I would ask, how would they continue to fund those on an ongoing basis? I mean, that ongoing fund, you can start them up, but if there hasn't been an agreement with the health department to continue funding of those, then that's a problem.
Thank you. Any
Okay,
other questions of the committee?
For existing certified centers that need more beds, need more beds. Is that appropriate for our committee to address? Is that been addressed elsewhere?
for existing homes that want to add that, so like a 6-person one moving to an 8-person one. Well, they have zoning requirements. There are certain zoning restrictions. I won't say restrictions, but requirements.
Right.
Recovery residences need to be, they're considered as single-family residences. In the zoning changes the Bobby made last year or the year before, 2 years ago. So they would need to meet zoning requirements. If it was to add, it's certainly something that, because it's adding residential or housing, that would be something appropriate for your committee to consider. We would probably also, they're going to be trying to find it wherever they can, so they would probably also be asking us for it. I would just caution to think about, what are we doing in terms of housing here, and the general operations stuff and ongoing operations is stuff that's covered in our budget.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we're done. Thank you so much.
All righty.
Come
Thank
by
you.
and explain, and I will circle back.
Okay, thanks so much.
Cameron, you? I would focus on the changes just with, if there's no change, maybe just a, very, very brief summary of what we're talking about.
Back in the chair. For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. We are looking at draft 8.1 of the committee bill related to housing. The subject and the statement of purpose haven't really changed since the last time we met. It's highlighted because we sent this to our editors this morning to review the changes that, have walked through, and they haven't reviewed this yet. So this is more for them. And that's also gives me the opportunity to just kind of comment that this version was with our editors this morning. I may have received it back by now. I'm not sure, but at the point you want to vote it out, we'll have it edited. So just moving through the first section here, we're on page 2. We're looking at the changes that you all are proposing to the EHIP program. And I will pause on page 6. I'm going to pause here for a second. So if you all remember on page 6, subsection G, adding this requirement that there be a minimum set aside for the 5-year grants and forgivable loans. There was a question the last time we met on the G1 here about making sure the language was correct. And I did speak to or I emailed the department to ask, and the response I got back was they issue grants and 5-year loans. They issue 10-year loans. They don't issue 10-year grants, if you will. They tend to, when it's that duration, they tend to just be loans. And if you have any specific questions for them, I'd potentially defer.
So
to
is that language, the grants and loans language?
It's this, so we were talking about here, the remaining funds, right? So this subsection
I see.
A is setting aside a specific, it's allowing the department
Yeah.
to set aside a specific amount for the 5-year grants. And the question that came up was this line 6, remaining funds may be used for either 5-year grants, forgivable loans, or 10-year forgivable loans. And we just wanted to make sure we weren't limiting potential 10-year grants.
Right.
I talked to the department and they said that they don't do 10-year grants at that level or at that duration. So just clarifying that. So the change that we have, and I mentioned this in committee, that this was at the request of the Human Services Committee to add this language here. So I mentioned that to you all the last time I was here in committee, just wanted to reflect it that it has been added as words on a page.
This language, just for the committee, has been rather heavily worked on by everybody. Been worked on by the committee, both committees, Teresa's committee, our committee, been worked on by AC Housing Community Development. It's been worked on. So it's okay.
Okay, moving on to page 7 to a new subsection J. So page 7, line 11 is where subsequent to the last time we had a conversation, and I think it was mentioned for the committee, there was a discussion about adding a report back to your committee and to the Human Services Committee about the number of units that are being funded, the number of units that are the number that have been rehabilitated, I should say. And then when the expiration of the lease requirements, whether the unit is still being occupied by tenants that meet those requirements, the populations, the tenants that fall within the population of people that have to be leased to under the 5-year grant. Does that make sense?
Rep Rose, is this where you were interested in that language on short-term rentals?
It was.
So we had kind of a committee discussion yesterday afternoon. And there was thoughts on, in this report and looking for data. What was the question again?
Short-term rental.
Can we add that to after they are no longer?
On expiration, like.
Thank you.
Subsection.
Yes. How many become short-term rentals?
So let me make sure I understand the thought is in the report, having the department as part of the report, inform you if after the term in which the landlord has to comply with the requirements of the program, are they turning it into a short-term rental afterwards?
Yep.
Or is it becoming a short-term rental? I think the question, go ahead, Jeff.
I just would suggest that we probably limit that to within the following year. If it becomes, I mean, it could become one 10 years later down the road.
Oh, I think, isn't this drafted that it's a once a year report?
The report is once a year. I will echo Representative Parsons there, and that is what the department kind of gave some feedback as we were looking for them to, sign off on this language. And I think the concern, I don't mean to speak for the department, but the concern that was shared via email was they're not going to be, this will be voluntary information. They can't mandate that a landlord provide, because again, too, on the 3, what you'll see is also asking, on expiration of the applicable lease requirements. So if you remember 5-year lease to the certain populations that are identified, you're making the change on the 10-year to go to a fair market rent. So in either of those two circumstances, upon the expiration of those requirements, so after 5 years or after 10 years, how the rent compares to fair market rent. And their comment back was, we can ask the landlords to give us that information, but at that point, we can't mandate that they give us the information. So yes, we could add a subsection here that says, for the year after the lease requirements expire, did the unit become a short-term rental? And then I assume the department is just going to let you know that it's a voluntary request and they can't mandate it.
I'm wondering whether there aren't several different issues here.
Yeah.
One issue which Joe is alluding to, if I heard you right, is we want to make sure, at least it was my intention when I drafted the precursor to this artfully redrafted language, was that it was just all for that year. In other words, there's no way, we don't want, in other words, if something terminates, a 5-year, let's say one apartment unit terminates, what we want is information, if they can get it, on what the fate of that apartment was. And I think that it could include short-term rental. But that doesn't mean to me that then forever forward, they have to track that unit.
Just when it comes up.
It's when it comes off. And because it's not about doing anything about that unit. There's nothing we can do about that unit. It's about knowing what we've lost, helping us think about the future. So one thing I would suggest is that it be clarified, that somehow you say, for example, for each program upon expiration, that police requirements, the section for that year, the amount, or something like that. The second issue is short-term rental. And I think a sense of the committee might be that we should add short-term rental, but I would say I do not have an objection, and I'm wondering how the committee feels. The same, to the extent that information is available.
That's.
It's fine by me, but I don't really want to, but we can.
I mean, if they're not gonna, it's not what they would know. Well, okay. I'm just throwing that out. What's the sense of the committee?
I don't think it's necessary
Okay.
because it is to the degree.
It's true that we're not gonna put them in jail if they don't get
And
it.
it's not mandated, there's nothing we could do, so what's the point of having it? How many people would actually respond to it?
I don't know.
So I don't understand, the request was from you to add it, But now you don't want to.
No, short-term rental, she does.
I'm asking to add short-term rental. Yes.
No, I just said there's three separate issues. One is to make it clear that it's for each, just for that year. In other words, when the unit goes off in a year. they have
I just want to know what happens to it.
we want to know what happens to it. The second is to say, to the extent available, and I'm hearing, don't bother. And the third is, short-term rental. We'd like to know if it's turned into a short-term rental. Yeah,
So the landlord certificate is an annual,
the certificate, yes.
the landlord certificate is annual. And if that indicates that it's a landlord certificate, that is short-term rental, it also contains the span number, which should make it easy to correlate one database with the other, and
Does it
you
indicate,
should be able to determine
don't know if it.
from the
does it
landlord.
Indicate if it's a short-term rental?
I think we were asking for that to be added on to the.
Yeah, I think that's,
That go is in the language on, where is that? Landlord certificate. The name of each renter, the address, name of the owner, phone number, types of rental units, type or
Yeah,
types
it's in
of rental
there.
units, that's in there. It's in the landlord certificate.
so if we know, from, if we know which ones are ending in a given year, we have the span numbers. We can correlate it with the data lever that we get from. The landlord certificate,
Right.
and that'll determine
I
that they do have to file.
don't, yeah, I.
So we can
agree. I
get the
don't know
data.
if it's necessary.
Right.
Your thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
What would you like me to?
Just add for the year. Everything else.
Okay.
That's it.
And then the last one here, the rate of turnover for tenants housed utilizing the grants for forgivable loans. So we're on page 8. Moving, the next section is the manufactured home improvement repair program. As you all recall, this is simply making this program permanent, not any changes to the current, what is allowed to be funded through this program. Putting it in statute so the department can begin to ask for annual money in their base budget. Okay, no changes there from the last time we reviewed. Okay, sorry, I got confused myself with the $15,000 there. Vermont Infrastructure Sustainability Fund. If you recall, this is adding, a special fund with the Vermont Bond Bank, to then be funded and, be available to, issue out to municipalities for infrastructure funding. No changes here to what you all have reviewed in the past, so I'm going to keep going unless there are any questions. Moving on to the next section, which is the Universal Design Study. And I will point out two things here that are not highlighted on your page. Apologies there. It's the assistance piece and the funding piece. If you all recall, last time I was here, I asked where the.
Page.
My apologies. We are on page 14. Moving into page 15. I'm going to get.
This is on the universal design study.
Yes, sir. Page 15, subsection D, line 9. So what I changed, so last time we talked, I mentioned that the $15,000 appropriation to the per diems has to go somewhere to then be available to be dispersed to those individuals. And there was a question about where that should go. I also commented about the assistance piece and, whether you wanted assistance from an entity that had a little more specialized knowledge in this area. The request was, well, could Vermont Housing Finance Agency be that entity? We spoke with them. They can't receive a direct appropriation for it. So it seemed a bit odd for $15,000 to go to the department to be granted to VHFA to then be used for per diems for this committee. And so the compromise there was to have it just go through the department. And if the money is going to the department, it, seemed appropriate to have the assistance be coming from the department as well. So that's the change that we have here. Wanted you all to be aware of that. And so you will see a corresponding change on the next page, subsection H, where it's just the sum of the money is appropriate to the Department of Housing and Community Development.
So the first one was under staffing,
The assistance piece, yes, sir.
which is where?
Page 15, subsection D, which is line 9. The committee shall have the administrative, technical, and legal assistance of the Department of Housing and Community Development. And then the money would go to them as well.
Elizabeth, is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Moving into the next section, so we're at the bottom of page 16, moving to the top of page 17, we have the tax department housing data access here. I haven't made any changes since the last time we talked. Moving into the next section, we have, this is the bottom of page 17, the first generation home buyer and down payment assistance program. So this is adding the ability for tax credits for Vermont Housing Finance Agency for the first generation home buyer and the down payment assistance program. We've made no changes there, but I see there's a question.
Yeah, more of just a general question. When you self-attest to something, does that naturally come with a penalty for not, if you lie on it?
Perjury?
Does it just like naturally work that way? Or does the document you sign have to include that in it?
If my understanding is if you want something to come with a penalty associated, like perjury, then you would specifically need to specify. So when you're looking at the definition of first generation home buyer, so this is on page 18, as you will see, it is a self-attestation.
Yeah.
My understanding is I'm not aware of a penalty in that program for somebody who intentionally misrepresents to receive the money, but I don't know if, maybe a question for VHFA, if there's something that, is in a different section of statute.
Representative VHFA
they
here.
could rely on.
You wanna,
You nail them to the wall if they lie on it or what?
would you, please, do you know anything about this enough that we should introduce you?
My name is Chad Simmons, Vermont Housing Finance Agency. I'd have to check with our participating lenders what process they would go through. So this is just one of many bits of information that they would need to share as part of getting a mortgage approved to be able to buy it. So I'd have to check to see what kinds of penalties would be administered if they were to not tell the truth about their status of.
You think it would be something or?
Again, I'd
Don't know.
have to check with,
Okay.
I'd have to check with our lenders. I can get back to you by the end of the day.
Thank you.
Yep.
We'd like to be, I may be optimistic, but I hope not, in a position to vote this out right after the floor. So if you could get back to us and Cameron a little before that, it would be nice.
Yep.
We can always vote subject to the draft, certain agreed changes, but the closer we get, the better.
Okay. Moving through page, going to the next section, so apologies for the scroll there. So page 20, so we have the land bank report that we've discussed, November 1, 2025, Department of Housing, Community Development issued this report back about the creation of a statewide or regional land bank. No changes to this section since the last time we've reviewed. Moving into section 8, housing appeals. My understanding is there's some changes here. They are highlighted. I'm not gonna
I'll
walk
tell you
through
what,
them.
you shouldn't walk it through, but since Ellen is not available, this section, nothing has changed in terms of its effect. It's just better written. And it was done with the collaboration of the Vermont Natural Resources Council and who submitted some suggested changes which again, they're not substantive changes. They were literally lawyer writing changes to Ellen, and Ellen reviewed them and accepted them with her own, which VNRC then agreed with. Yes.
I'd like to hear the changes from Ellen. After the floor. Which I just talked to Magali about.
Assuming the floor ends at 3:30, we can have her from 3:30, sorry. We can have her from 3:30 to 4-ish or after 4:45.
I think it's important to. For transparency for myself and if others feel that way before a vote, that I hear from them what every change was.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quick. So those are the, section 8, section 9, so we're moving along. I'm going to get to page. Apologies, 27. The bottom of page 27, moving to the top of page 28, you have your brownfield language, the brownfield cleanup change, the process improvement report, nothing has changed from these sections, over the past few times that we've met, so there's no highlights there. So I'm going to keep going till we get to the top of page 30. Here's where we have the section that is being added, which authorizes a municipality to vote to enact a 1% tax on short-term rentals. So this is not a mandated tax. This is authorization of that municipality. And as you can see in the sub A, the legislative body would have to vote to recommend, and then it would have to be voted on by the individuals in the municipality. So nothing changed since the last time we
No, I
met
just,
in that section.
That's helpful, and that's what I asked you earlier. I just want to clarify for the public and people again, that we are not. As a committee, putting another tax on short-term rentals. We are simply allowing municipalities to make that decision. So I think that's a distinction that has been in the air of the building, that is some confusion.
That is very much true. In other words, we have been facing, as we've heard testimony on this, a reality. I mean, there are a number of realities, but we've been facing a reality that there is a great variety of but among different towns and their relationship with short-term rentals. There are towns which may want to make them almost impossible to build. There are other towns, particularly, for example, in the Kingdom, where there are almost no hotels, where they view short-term rentals as very positively as the way they can accommodate tourists who want the Vermont experience. So it's
And their own housing.
and their own housing, and it's a way for people who live there, et cetera. We do. So at this point in time, in this bill, what we have elected to do is simply enhance the ability of local towns who already, it turns out, I mean, in an early draft of this, we gave them the ability to regulate. It turned out they already had it. So what's left was the ability to tax if they want to a point.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are on page 30, so moving to the second half of that page in the landlord certificate. If you all recall, section 17, what we're doing is we're repealing what passed last year, which is making changes to the landlord certificate. We're taking that back, and then we're inserting something that is slightly different. And so we have the section 18 landlord certificate here. We haven't made any changes to this section since the last time we met. I will comment. One of the questions that came up the last time we discussed was here on the top of page 32 with the requirement that this information be provided annually. I mentioned that the tax department had requested that they not be required to issue this until 2026. I drafted it for them to require the information in 2025. I don't want to speak for the department, but What came back to me was they're okay with that, if that is what the committee would like. They wanted to be clear, though, that the information that you're going to get in 2025 is not going to be reflective of the new information, because this will not be required until January of 2026.
Right.
So you won't get the aggregate of the new information until December of 2026. Makes sense. Okay. All right, we are on page 32. So the VHFA offsite construction report, 250,000 going to VHFA to, continue to work on the recommendations that were outlined in this offsite report that was issued in 2025. And you all worked on making sure that this was clear what you were getting back from them. So haven't made any changes to this section since the last time we met. And then we get into the appropriations section. There are no changes here, but just to very quickly, section 20, 450,000 for 3 new positions for the Department of Housing and Community Development. My understanding is that's 2 positions for VHIP, 1 position for the Manufactured Home Repair Program, another 300,000 to continue the 2 limited service positions that they already have. And then page 34, moving through, you have the appropriations that you all have worked on and asked to be included. We have 27 million to Vermont Housing Conservation Board. 25 million for housing, 2 million for the resident services program that we've discussed that was enacted in Act 2081, just not funded. We have 41 million going to the Department of Housing and Community Development. I should say 41,735,000. 20 million for the Middle Income Home Ownership Development Program Rental Housing Revolving Loan Fund. 15 million for the Vermont Bond Bank, 4 million for VHIP, 2 million for the manufactured repair, 500,000 for the home ownership centers, 235,000 for home care, and then 400,000 to AHS for the SASH program, 373,000 to Vermont State Colleges for the creation of HVAC apprenticeship program, workforce development program, 448,500 to Department of Labor for a 3-year grant to the Associated General Contractors of Vermont for expanding their training and certification programs in construction and building trades. And moving to page 37, lastly, we have the section that you all were just talking with the Chair of Human Services.
Just a few thoughts about this list of appropriations. One is, one of the things that I was testifying for an hour. Appropriations. One of the things I did, you remember we had tiers in our letter. I explained, see, one of the, I know this from my experience on that committee. One of the things you ask yourself is, can we only fund part of it? I mean, it's just a natural question when you can only fund a little bit. So for a given thing, can we just do a little bit? Sometimes the answer is no. It really makes no sense. It's all or nothing. That's particularly true often with the smaller appropriations. On the other hand, it's pretty obvious that VHIP and particularly the middle income and especially VHCB, they'll take whatever they get. So, I mean, theoretically, VHCB could be cut to 5 million. And that would be and they would use 5 million. Right. And in fact, as I mentioned right at the start today, I think I just, out of transparency, I want the committee to be aware that it is, at least my personal opinion in light of what I have heard in the hallways, that none of these large appropriations will end up being anything like what they are now. But I did say to the committee that although a lot of the smaller appropriations were on tier 3, that didn't mean that we didn't think they were real bargains, because they are small amounts and you get a lot for a little bit, like in home share or SASH, or in tier 2, we had the Vermont State College and Department of Labor appropriations for, that those aren't that big a number. and that they
Big
get,
impact.
that have a big impact. I explained that we had testimony before us. We had testimony in front of us from many contractors and developers who basically said, if you don't increase the number of people doing the work,
Right.
nothing else matters. So
That's
in
very
fact, I started off by saying to the committee, do you remember Maura Collins appeared before us at the beginning of the biennium? And you remember that game where she asked us all to guess which of like 10 causes of housing it was and rank them? And then she said, well, guess what? It's all of them. I reminded them of that and I
Oh,
said,
nice.
each one of what we're trying to do is address in this bill some of each one of the problems. And so, I can't tell you what will happen. But I'd like to raise for the committee your preferences on the last page of the bill, that is the recovery residences. And I invite the committee to opine on this. I will say, as a general matter, I do respect committee jurisdiction because I want committees to respect our jurisdiction. And I also, as a general matter, respect committee jurisdiction if it's clear that it is a rather complicated area and our knowledge is superficial. So for example, do you remember the discussion we had on the 1% tax ability of towns to add 1% tax on short-term rental? We started to get into the question of, should it be collected by the town and administered by the town, or should it be administered by the Department of Taxes? And I really thought, and you guys agreed, let's just put it in there and signal to the Ways and Means Committee, guys, this is your expertise. You know what we want. Work with it. So I tend to defer to expertise when I see it. And with that, I would appreciate thoughts on what we do with this. Joe?
Thank you. I can certainly understand where they're coming from when they came in this morning. If we are gonna remove that from the bill, I would suggest we keep the 325,000 in B. That seemed like a pretty substantial hurdle that they're able to help people with, and they can just take care of that first month getting in the door.
I just want to say, the only time Ellen is available is at noon. And I'm going to schedule her.
That's good.
This is going to be a little difficult. How's the committee on this?
We can't do it at noon. We have a,
Okay. What's the committee's pleasure on this?
I mean,
you all can.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you all can't. It's just.
we have the house.
I had requested it, but I can also just look at the legalese myself, on my. No, but I'm saying like, if other people don't need the explanation of the change in appeals, like from the lawyer, then that's fine too. I was just thinking that if folks wanted that as, an option.
I'd really like it if you could have her come in at noon so that it can be recorded so we can see what she says. Because
Before
we can't
vote,
miss.
though?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay, you'll watch it.
yeah.
Okay.
all right. So we'll have her in it.
I actually have a
Yeah.
panel at noon myself.
Actually,
The other option is,
I don't
looks
know what-
like Ellen might be available at 9 tomorrow morning. I know that we want to get this bill out, but if I need.
I'm not holding it up, like, if it's me, like,
I wanted
Yeah.
to give that option to anyone if they felt.
and I
more
didn't mean
comfortable.
to start like
I
the,
would really like to try to vote this out this afternoon. I
yeah,
think that one of the reasons is I really want to allow us to have time to deal with 57, time to deal with the 300 unpaid leave, et cetera. So,
yeah, I have a panel at noon.
well,
I will also watch the video.
right. And one thing we can do now,
Give us your questions.
Yeah, right.
yeah.
I just wanted it to be explained
Right,
by Alan what the changes are,
Right.
because appeals is very important to me in
Right.
this bill. And so I just wanted
Okay.
to,
I also, when Cameron So let's decide.
So noon.
Let's,
just come.
yeah, noon. Okay, so let's decide on page 37 what we
Oh,
want to
right.
do. Joe favors leaving in the
25.
25,000 B, so line
I agree.
11.
I also favor earlier in our appropriations, being a little more realistic with the BHCB fund and putting it at 12 million with the 2 million. So 10 and 2. As opposed to 25 and 2. Which doesn't mean they get 10 million, it means they get 50 million.
They're gonna get what they're gonna get. Yeah,
Well, that would be,
yeah, that would be your preference. Well, we're in discussion. Let's discuss this
No,
one.
those are my two.
Decide, no, but we'll come back.
I
to general
agree,
discussion.
I agree on the, that section with what Joe said.
Whoops,
I second.
line 11 on page 37, the same, put in,
Is that,
our purview?
is that was
Yeah.
was it that, was it line, was it that, or was it the 360?
It was
It's the, I thought it was the 360 from the, let me look at.
what they're wanting, or what's?
No, I just want to know if we did one, which it is. I don't know if it's the 360 from the general fund or the 325.
I think the general fund was saying that that's on them, because that's
Yeah.
just
Okay,
routine operation.
and they're
Right.
saying the sum of 325.
That is our,
That's it,
if
okay.
we
So
want
we
it.
would have to make a change there,
Yeah.
just saying that's coming from the general fund.
No,
No, it's already, everything
That
is
one
from the
is-
general fund. except
No, because
the-
that 325 is set to come out of the opioid.
Yeah, that's what
So
I'm
we
saying.
have to, right,
Yes.
clarification. I want to keep it, but we have to take it out of the opioid.
Yeah, pay attention.
But also, shouldn't it specify what it should be
It does.
used for?
That one
First
does.
month fees for individuals entering.
intended to
So,
cover startup
my
fees,
question-
startup costs of 3 new residents.
No, that's the
No.
360, we're talking
So
about.
we're looking at right here. And we're saying that the issue is currently it's coming out the 1.8 million. And it can't.
Yeah, yeah, I know, but I'm just wondering, because the email that I'm reading from
Yeah,
says, remember Teresa said, it's okay if it's for new residences, 3 new residences, okay. That is, yes, it's the 300,000 plus 300,000 from opioid special funds is intended to cover the startup costs of 3, you're right, of 3 new residences, which VTAR, I guess that's Vermont
Veto.
Recovery
Yeah.
Residents, whatever, has identified will be operational in fiscal year 26. We are asking for this to be accommodated into 18. Okay.
Well,
So,
isn't that, sorry, isn't that she's saying, if they're asking for money from you, sorry.
yeah, I can't tell from the email whether they're new residences or not.
so
I think that was their ask that didn't get okayed by the board. They didn't
Right,
prioritize that ask.
Right.
Getting it here.
right.
So they're saying we should probably stick with what the board says.
So what does this mean for this language?
So basically we would strip out the 360, 182515, and then leave the section B with the 325, but it has to come out of the general fund.
Right, moving it.
So we're not doing the 3 new funds because that was.
Already decided by the.
That's
Right,
already
so,
established.
so what you're suggesting is that if we did that, we would write, the following shall be appropriate in fiscal year 2026 to the Department of Health. $300,000 from the general fund for recovery residences.
For the first month fees for individuals entering.
He wants lines 11 and 12
Just moved.
moved up to become subsection 1, B1.
And then remove what's already there
Yeah,
for
and then
B1.
remove everything else.
But maybe, do you need to have the phrase from the general fund, the sum of 325K to cover first month fees?
Yeah.
That's just my, keep in mind, this is just my, so you got like,
Right.
Could it be first month?
Well, so that it doesn't specify anything to do with opioid abatement.
Well, that, and it's not duplicating stuff that's
the only
already
thing-
being funded.
yeah,
otherwise.
I'm not sure about the accuracy of this, but I just want to say. The 325 in this memo and here is not about startup costs for 3 new residents.
We agree with that.
It's just about first month fees for individuals. I thought Teresa was telling us that what she would be okay with is money for startup for new residences, not operating money. And that is a $300,000 addition, which doesn't show up in here. It's just buried in the
1.5.
1.5, a $300,000 addition to the opioid special fund intended to cover the cost of 3 new residences.
But it sounds like there is no plan for 3 additional new residences. They had already set up 3 new residences
Right,
that are
in which-
coming online.
in which
And they were
case-
just asking for extra additional.
Yeah.
money.
To start 3 more.
No,
No?
just to keep the 3
Just to
that
keep
they're
those 3
starting.
going?
That, as far as I understand.
Yes,
That's
that
not
is,
what I understood.
That was.
well, that is what Chair Wood testified. This is saying something different. So the email, if you don't mind me looking over your shoulder, is intended to cover the startup costs of 3 new residences, which VTAR has identified will be operational in fiscal year 26. So the ones that Rep. Wood was talking about are operational 25.
Right.
These would be new residents.
Yeah.
These would be new
Yeah.
residents,
Yeah.
and her caution was
Right,
that,
Forward.
going forward, yeah.
right, so that they meet with.
So it would be
sustainable
300,000. So there's 2 issues. It's, should we include 300,000? And number 2, should it come from the general fund as opposed to the opioid? So,
No, I-
It can't come from, yeah,
we
they
can't.
said
That's
no
what she just
already.
said.
so it would
It
just
would
be
have to come from. the general.
300,000 from the general fund to cover the cost, startup costs of 3 new residents.
I would
No.
like to, oh,
Okay, that,
No, what we're done.
okay, go ahead, Joe.
That's
We're
not
not-
what
we
Joe
still
said.
have the floor.
Yeah.
Just,
Okay, ready? I'm gonna make it very best I can. I won't mess it up.
yeah, right.
All right. So we're getting rid of everything except lines 11 and 12 as far as recovery residences are concerned. And then those funds are coming out of the general fund. Don't even look at everything else.
They're for fees.
Don't even look at it.
For already existing residences, just for new individuals to be able to enter the existing
Yeah,
residences that are funded.
So think
For them
about
to
it.
cover their first month. It's like the down
yes,
payment.
yes,
program.
which is
Yeah.
the most
Revolving
important part Joe was saying to get.
Gets them in the door.
Gets them in the door.
That's critical, so I support the Joe.
My only question
analysis.
is that really in our purview? Because it's rental help? Or
And
is it?
This is where I say I'm happy to
step
not
on
care.
toes? Okay.
I would like it to specify,
I follow Joe.
Happy
Up
to
that hill,
not
up and
care.
over.
I would like it to specify that it covers, that it doesn't cover
Staffing.
staffing or treatment, that it only covers the
I mean.
residence related
Right.
costs.
I mean, it does eventually cover staffing.
To cover
Fees for
first month
individuals.
fees for individuals
The
entering
fees.
a certified recovery resident.
Whatever they're gonna
I mean, in
charge.
addition, eventually the fees will go to staffing and
But they're gonna go to individuals
Utilities,
covering the
yes.
entrance fee, which is so crucial, because as we always hear, you've got to strike when the,
Mhm.
And I'll also
Everyone's
say,
hot.
be the one to say all day long, housing is in everyone's jurisdiction at this point.
Yeah, right.
Is this, the committees that?
Yeah.
Well, can I say something,
Yes.
please? Thank
You
you.
certainly can.
Okay. So I'm just gonna, I was intentionally not in the room for the previous conversation because we're not supposed to interrogate the witnesses, and I know that that would have happened if I was in the room. So I was intentionally not in the room because I would have been very aggressive. I'm just saying that, that's where I'm at right now, this is where I'm coming from. So I'm gonna say this, when we're talking about recovery and we're talking about recovery housing, we're talking about up recovery residences and all of these things. And what Teresa said, in our jurisdiction, what it covers is the 3 new facilities. And I understand we're talking about sustainability and what that looks like. And also, we don't have beds right now. So if we are not looking at building more, we don't need to worry about how they're going to be funded sustainably. That's not going to keep people alive. Okay, people are going to die on the street if they don't have a place to go. So we're talking about how do we address this in multiple forms? So when we talk about that 300 in addition for those 3 new recovery residences, that's a non-negotiable for me. The getting the foot in the door is the second. That's the second priority. So the first priority, yes, is getting them in the door now. And also, there's no beds. And so that 15 beds of the whole recovery campus thing, that's 15 beds. How many people do we have currently in active addiction, currently seeking treatment right now? Those numbers are escalating. They're not declining. So if we're looking at 15 beds to address a crisis right now, while looking at a housing crisis, while looking at an opioid epidemic, I'm sorry, that seems unrealistic to me. So that's my 2 cents. Sorry. I was intentionally not in the room on purpose. I was trying to hold it in, but I couldn't do it. Sorry.
And I'm gonna
Start somewhere.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm just
This is
gonna
the starting point.
clarify, I want to just clarify
So
what
those
what I'm
2.
hearing from you,
Yes.
okay?
I agree.
Okay, what I'm hearing from you is shall we say, repeating the Joe mantra of, well, too bad that about jurisdiction. You are saying 2 things, not 1.
Yes,
You are saying, yes, let's include 11 and 12
Yes.
coming from the general fund.
absolutely.
But you would also like to include the 300,000
Yes.
from the opioid abatement.
I didn't
special
say
fund.
where. I didn't say from where. I'm
Okay.
I'm not saying where that money's supposed to
Okay,
come from.
plus 300, okay.
I'm just saying leave it in there. Where it comes from is not I don't know where that's going, that's not my issue.
Okay, I would like to know.
Exactly where you wanted to go.
There's money exists. We'll find it.
That's essentially what I am hearing, is what you just articulated.
Yeah, but do you agree
And,
with it?
and I, yes, I do. And I think they both fall within our jurisdiction to say where the housing committee, there needs to be more housing for this demographic, period.
What's the sense of the committee on this? Joe?
Just want to clarify. So that 15 is really, they already have 12, 1.2, not yet 15, 1.5. They already have 1.2 in base, like their
Yeah,
base
it's
appropriation.
Yeah.
So it's plus 3.
Plus.
So what I'm hearing, I just want to repeat this, is the sense of the committee is that that it would read something like 1, then we'd have lines 11 and 12, and 2, 300,000 from the general fund for 3 new recovery residences. Is this the sense of the committee?
I agree.
I believe it is. Is that going once? Going twice?
It's
So.
just real quick. Sorry, 100%, 110% in agreement. Cameron, does that make sense? Do you need anything else from us before we say this is what we want?
This is the note I was just making
Okay.
from the general fund. 625,000 in total, 300,000 for 3 new recovery residences. Certified that language, then 325 for the first month.
Correct.
That's where you get the big bucks.
They're not that big.
Define these. You have the email that came from Meg Lorraine, which defines. Okay. All right. I am going to take the liberty of just saying briefly, because we are going to have a noon go through. But I want to give you just a little background and information on appeal, since I've been really involved in this. This is not substitute for alleged counsel going through it. Right now, there are simply, the way the current law is written is there's two groups of people. The first group are people who live really near the property. And they have to be in the same town, even if the property's on the edge of the town boundary line. Okay. And they have to, they have to demonstrate that it has some effect on the environment or whatever. But it's called the abutter section, it's for people who are right there. Then there is something that I would call classic sort of citizen suit provision. It says, in addition, anyone else can sue if they want, for any reason. It's not stated what the reason is. There just have to be, it used to be 10, now 20. So any 20 people can just sue for any reason. And it is that section that is the problematic section for a lot of the people. I haven't heard in either the testimony or in the hallway a lot of debate about the idea of people who are abutters. But the abutter section is a way of sort of getting at kind of through the back door standing. I mean, it's just, it's just that you presume that if they're right next door, they would have standing. What this bill does is replace that regime. And I'm going to add a wrinkle for you. But first, I want to be real clear about what it basically does. It basically says, if you want to appeal, it just wipes out those provisions, both of them, and just says, if you want to appeal, you have to have, well, obviously appeared below and participated. That's always been there. But you have to be a person aggrieved. And aggrieved is a defined term now in the law. It is originally applied only to Act 250, but now it's written to apply to both lawsuits from Act 250, but also from, any municipal appeal. And it means a person who alleges an injury to a particularized interest protected by the provisions of law in this title, attributable to an act or decision by the district court or district commission, an appropriate municipal panel. So it's the particularized interest test. Okay, are you with me?
Yeah, so right now the difference is adding the language that the panel is involved.
It's just
The
the only,
municipal
what it
panel.
did, yes, it adds that to the definition. It uses the definition that's in the law for Act 250 of a aggrieved person and adds a municipal panel.
And when I was asking someone, so would that be planning commission, DRB?
Anything that's appealed,
Okay,
Now, are you with me?
yep.
No, I just have super quick. So you're saying that this little phrase of appropriate municipal panel is not currently in the language? We're
Right.
adding it.
It was only because it was only applied to Act 250.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Now it applies to
Just
everything.
state.
That's
Okay.
making it uniform.
Got
And
it.
it's applying the classic standard, and the advantage of that is there's all this case.
Yeah.
Everybody knows in the world what a grieved person is. It's not easy to plead. It's actually not. Okay, are you with me so far?
Hmm.
You are? Okay, because now I'm going to add something. So in a way, if you ask the question, well, does this make it easier or harder?
That was my question.
Yeah, well, the answer is a little of both, mostly harder. It makes it a little easier because if you're no longer forced to live in the same town, but you can be right across the border. It doesn't matter. The question is, are you aggrieved? Period. And the
Okay.
universe of people who are aggrieved is much narrower than the citizen suit provision that said anybody can sue for any reason they want.
Mm-hmm.
And we get rid of the 20 people. Okay, now I'm going to tell you why it's really important to get rid of the 20 people.
Well, yeah.
When Judge Zone was in here, and he did it when he was in. Judge Zone reminded us that there was a case that was decided 3 years ago, which was not published. It does not have precedential effect. in the sense that a subsequent judge doesn't have to follow it. It's not, a trial judge doesn't have to follow law that isn't published. And it isn't published until it goes up on appeal, and the appeal, in this case, the Supreme Court makes a decision.
They
But
just haven't taken it up.
they didn't take it up. It was nobody appealed.
Nobody appealed it,
So it happens all the time. Trial courts decide all kinds of things. They write an opinion, and it's might be used as precedent by other judges, but it's voluntary whether they do or they don't.
Right.
And in this case, since it's the environmental court and there's only two judges, I would say that there's some likelihood that they might. Okay? All right. So what the judge ruled was he was looking at that 20-person, well, it was 10 people back then. He was looking at that section that was a citizen suit provision and had no provision for standing in it. Okay? And he was saying, too bad.
Particular of having to prove. a
Yeah, you didn't
particular-
have to prove it. It's just clear on its face. It's not there. But he said, well, as a matter of judge-made law, I'm saying it is. And he imposed.
Saying it is meaning that those 10 people, regardless of who they are, have to have particular.
As written. He said the standing requirement applies. I'm just putting it on as judge-made law. And it applies to every one of the 10 people.
Yeah.
Which means in today's world, not only every one of 20 people would have to show a particularized interest, which would mean that if I had a house right next to some project that someone was building, and they really did a stupid job of controlling runoff, and it was going to flood my basement, I could not sue unless I could find 19 other people in my exact position, which is, shall I say, weird. That's my own personal opinion. This change just takes all of that away. It's just not an issue anymore. So it's a simplification. It narrows the purview of people who can feel it. So that's a brief summary, which Ellen can take us through at noon.
I mean, yeah,
So we're broadening. We're opening up his decision a bit. His
Yes, a bit.
decision was much narrower.
Yeah, well, his is really narrow if it applied to every one of 20 people.
Yeah.
We're saying it's not irrelevant how many people there are. What matters is the people who appeal, can they show they are actually aggrieved? Which will narrow, it certainly would dramatically narrow the range of appellants if a court were just to follow the plain language of what was originally there, which was that any 20 people can appeal for whatever reason they want. Joe,
And currently with municipal decisions, you have to live in that town.
if you have to live in the town if you're in a butter. And.
So if you get the, right now.
Wait, I'll tell you.
Sorry.
Hold on.
Did you ask currently?
Permanent.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, you have to be in the town, no
You have to
matter
be.
what. Both of the sections, the abutter section and the 20 people for whatever reason they want, they all have to be in the town.
Okay, so we're opening it up to the
Some people outside of the
one
town.
person, as long as they're aggrieved.
As they have to
And
be.
they have to be
in town.
agreed.
So it could be somebody affected by a watershed, like.
Right.
Well, let's say my house, that use the example, was in the other side of the boundary of the town.
We're a border town.
I don't think it's gonna come up very much, but it could come up with a development on the edge of the town.
Which currently they can't.
They can't, right?
And
Do we think they should be?
Do I think which?
We should open it up to that.
Yeah, I don't have, as long as aggrieved is there, I wouldn't.
Under this, yeah.
Yeah, as long as
I
aggrieved
guess.
is there, yeah, I mean, they have to show they're impacted. If they're impacted, what difference does it make whether they're in a town or not? They certainly can come and participate. They have to have participated below. So they gotta go to the neighboring towns, select board or whatever, and make their point. Or else they can't. Everybody has to, what the term
right,
is.
but then couldn't the select board or body, like, then they could, it's still, that's another hiccup though, or a barrier,
What is?
like having to go through that process. They do anyway.
They do it.
They do.
They do
yeah.
anyway.
And everybody has to
You
do
can't
what's
just come
called.
in at the last
Yeah,
minute
you
and
can't
say,
come
I don't
in.
like this.
Everybody has to exhaust their administrative remedy.
Right, so then why is it's just specifying that in language?
It's already there, that they have to exhaust their administrative remedy. everybody has to appear.
From the start.
Yeah.
Right, no, I know, I'm saying why the new addition of having the municipal body, like, that was necessary to put in there for.
Well, otherwise aggrieved only covers Act 250. It doesn't cover it. It was necessary to put in there to apply the aggrieved person standard to appeals from towns.
Got it.
So that's the appeal section. There is, I think we are close. It's 11:15. At 11, two things are happening. One is that your vice chair is becoming your chair. As I go over and attempt to get clarity on what is happening in Environment Committee. They are meeting on this matter at 11.
Yeah, okay.
And we are going to hear H57, an act relating to survivor benefits. And if it's okay with the committee, we're going to take a break between now
Yes.
and 11. Joe?
I would like to
Oh,
break.
yes, just before we do break, I just want to bring to everyone's attention that I did make two.
Yes,
Okay.
you thought that VHCB should be 10 minutes.
Right.
12, right. Okay. Which in fact may end up being the case, but that's what you would like the text to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Let's say the word.
Yeah.
are we okay if we do the A word?
Just-
Okay, we are adjourned.